Steve here. It's the show where I answer your questions, and this week my first question comes from Jonathan Vale. Hey, longtime fan, someone asked me this question and I wanted to know what you think about it. How do you feel about white people being proud of being white? How do you feel about black people being proud of being black? I think one of those things is very okay and the other one is very not okay. Would you care to guess which one is which? White people in the United States have never been oppressed or dehumanized or held back because of their skin color. So to say you have white pride is to basically insist that you're proud of something that is just a random genetic trait that you happen to be born with that you have never been told not to be proud of. And with black folks, it's exactly the opposite. Black folks throughout the entire history of the United States have been brutalized and oppressed and held back and marginalized and subjected to unspeakable suffering because of their skin color. They have been defined as a group by their skin color and punished and beaten and held back and murdered in many cases with no justice for their murderers. And treated unfairly by the criminal justice system and by law enforcement. And you can go on and on and on and on about the injustices visited on black folks. So they have been told for generations that their blackness is something wrong, that their blackness is something bad, that their blackness is something that brings shame to them, that they should be embarrassed about, that they should be worried about. Black folks have suffered because of their blackness. That's why black pride is a good thing and a healthy thing and something that should be encouraged, and we should strive to be allies with black folks in their continued efforts to overcome bigotry and prejudice and racial inequality and white power. See, I just said it. White pride is associated with white power movements and is just, at best, is tone deaf and blind and ignorant to the actual situation, and at worst is a cover for just flat out white supremacy. So it's the bad one. Avrasatos, have you seen Penn Jillette's video on Islam? It's from a while back, like January or so, but I liked the conclusion he came to, and I was curious what your thoughts were. I'm gonna watch it right now.
I like them. And afterwards, very little chance.
Well, I just watched it, and I think that's a great video. His conclusion is fantastic, and that's the conclusion that I would hope more of us would draw, which is that our disagreements with Islam, our feelings as atheists that Islam is a false religion, no less than other religions, should come second to the fact that Muslims in our own country are being terribly mistreated and marginalized and discriminated against and dehumanized and vilified. And Muslims around the world are being victimized and violently attacked, often by people from their own faith. You know, people who are extremists, who are members of these violent, radical, extremist sects of Islam, who are committing acts of violence and terrorism and military conquest and creating in parts of the Middle East, most notably Syria, this appalling refugee crisis that the United States is not doing its part to help with, not carrying its weight on, often due to Islamophobia, anti-Muslim bigotry, the perception that because a person is a Muslim, that they should therefore implicitly always be under scrutiny for being a terrorist, for being a threat to our society, and therefore we shouldn't let them in. That to me must take precedence. And yes, what I love the most about that video, the Penn video, is when he says, yes, I believe that Islam is a wrong religion, just like I believe that about Christianity and Judaism and other religions. But my heart tells me that that's not as important right now. My heart tells me that Muslims need our help and we need to be on their side. I agree. Scott Bresinger, it seems as though every time I visit YouTube, there's a new Steve Shives takedown video being recommended for me. I tried watching one of them and could only manage 3 minutes since it seemed like a poorly produced temper tantrum from an emotionally stunted 5-year-old boy. I'm wondering though, if these asshats are going to keep making them, is there a way for you to monetize it? If you made even a few pennies from their pants-pissing fake outrage, that might encourage them to turn their attentions elsewhere. On a related note, have you heard Eli Bosnick's recent audio blog where he favorably compares you to Nickelback? I understand where he was coming from, and I mostly agree, but Nickelback? Keep up the good work. Well, the good news is a lot of those, how did you put it, emotionally stunted 5-year-olds throwing temper tantrums are having trouble monetizing their own videos. YouTube taking steps to make it more difficult for those types of creators who profit on stoking outrage and attacking people and inciting harassment and vilifying people, as opposed to actually, writing a video and creating a coherent argument for themselves. People who just cannibalize someone else's content and piss on it and then put it up as their own video and say, see, that's getting more difficult to do and to do profitably on YouTube, which is a good thing overall. So yeah, there's that. And as far as Eli's piece, yeah, Eli was kind enough to actually share that with me privately before he made it public, and I was incredibly moved by it. I thought it's one of the nicest things that anybody has ever said about me or written about me. Yes, the Nickelback comparison might seem a little insulting, but if you if you listen to it or read it and get his overall point, it's actually very flattering to me, and it's incredibly gratifying to me that someone as funny and as smart and as sharp and as kind as Eli, because Eli is just such a kind, humane person. He's one of my favorite people, and certainly one of my favorite people in the skeptical atheist movement, and to have him write something so kind about me was really wonderful. So yeah, I did see that, and I really enjoyed it and was really flattered and sort of taken aback by how nice it was. Blue Butt Berry Onion Cakes. Hi Steve. First off, sorry about the username. My question is as follows. With the events in Charlottesville, there's been an increase in the amount of social political, for lack of a better term, conversations. Topics like statues, Nazism, fascism, intolerance, and things of that nature. Now I, like everyone else I know, am against Nazis and intolerance, but there's a problem. I'm a very good listener, and during conversations, most of the time the person I'm listening to is fallacious. It's become common for me to hear rhetorical fallacies, things like begging the question, appeal to ignorance, tu quoque, and the works. If I were to point it out, the conversation gets cut off and dies, and I don't want to kill the conversation. How do I politely tell someone that they are using rhetorical fallacies? It's tough to do that in the conversation. I think the best thing to do would probably be to make a note of the fallacious reasoning that you perceive them to be using, and then maybe try to bring it up with them later so that it doesn't derail the conversation or piss them off and halt the conversation. The best thing to do is to just give them the benefit of the doubt, hear out their arguments, and respond accordingly, and then worry about correcting their reasoning or pointing out the fallacies that they're using later on. And when you do that, when you do point out the fallacies, do it in a way where you're sort of saying, what I would prefer is because I know what argument you're making, but maybe if you phrased it this way, or maybe if you approached it this way, like don't lead with, you did it wrong, don't do it that way. Offer them a way that you think is more consistent or less fallacious. A more valid argument that they could make to make the same point. Assuming, of course, that the conversation you're having is with someone who is trying to make a good point, but just doing it in a sort of logically suspect way, a sort of specious way. If the person is making a bad point, or they're, let's say that they're arguing for Nazis, or they're arguing for a position that is sympathetic to Nazis or whatever, I mean, unless you're super attached to the conversation, if you catch them in a fallacy, I would have no problem with just swooping in and just taking care of business right there. Jacob Zentichko, have you ever felt your atheist activism come into conflict with your political activism? This past week I was staffing a table for the local Democratic Party group in a highly conservative and religious area. There were times when people would argue with me and my political side wanted to say one thing, usually diplomatic, while my atheist side wanted to say something far more blunt and to the point. While I feel that my political activism is more urgent, I don't like suppressing my atheist activism because it is still important to me. There are times when I feel that I could defeat an argument with an atheist answer, but I don't want to turn the discussion into a religion versus atheist debate. At the same time, it is extremely difficult when a person only presents religious arguments for their side and just completely ignores when I try to point out people of the same religion on both sides of an argument. Any thoughts could be helpful. Well, one thing you could try, which you probably have tried, or you may have tried because it's not an uncommon tactic, would be if someone is arguing for a position that you politically disagree with, but the only argument that they can offer is a religious one, you could try to do something like what President Obama used to do when he would address similar responses and say, you know, there has to be a reason for doing this that applies to everyone regardless of religion. You know, if the only reason you have for either opposing this policy or supporting this policy is a reason that is rooted specifically in your religion, and you can't come up with a reason that doesn't need to reference your religion, then it's probably not a good argument, because we live in a secular society, in a religiously pluralistic society, and the government cannot take sides on religion, and that includes basing laws on the tenets of one particular religion. It has to be something that is broader than that. But in general, I mean, if you are at a political event, you know, if you're tabling at a political conference, for instance, it's probably best to avoid explicitly atheist arguments as much as possible, even if you are in a religious argument with somebody else, because I think it would be a distraction. I mean, as you say, you know, there's political activism and there's atheist activism. If you are there, if you're someplace representing atheism or representing an atheist or a secular organization, then by all means go to town as an atheist. But if you're there representing a political party or a political organization, I think it's probably best just strategically to avoid making explicitly atheist arguments. David Colby, Dear Steve, I have two questions. One, how do you deal with the people constantly saying you're worse than cancer because you support human rights and oppose right-wing idiocy? I'm getting similar flack, though thankfully not at the same level or intensity yet, and want to hear some coping mechanisms other than making fun of them mentally. Two, you love Star Trek and have gone on at length about how your favorite is Deep Space Nine. Have you ever seen Babylon 5? You know, the way I deal with it is a combination of ignoring them and laughing at them. For the most part, the people who attack me and say these things about me and make response videos about me, like someone referenced in an earlier question, all of those people, by and large, I just ignore them. I don't watch the videos. I don't read their tweets. I don't pay any attention to them at all. I don't lend them any credence. I don't give them any of my time, because I think ultimately that's what they want from me, is for me to pay attention to them and to acknowledge them and to fight with them so that they'll have something else to make content out of. So I just ignore them. And also just, you know, having stuff other than YouTube in my life that means something to me, and not focusing my actual YouTube work on responding to those people. You know, I make videos about things that I think are important, and I take a lot of time to write them and shoot them and edit them to make them as good as I possibly can with my limited skill set, and I do the things that I want to do that have meaning to me and feel important to me, and say the things that I want to say, and I don't let the haters and the abusers and the harassers dictate my content. I keep it off of the channel. I don't make videos responding to them. I don't really even talk about them all that much. I do what I was going to do anyway. I do what I would have done if they weren't even there, for the most part. So that helps too. And as for Star Trek, Deep Space Nine, and Babylon 5, yes, of course, I've seen all of Babylon 5. It's been a long time since I watched it. But yeah, I watched it when it was originally airing. And for a few years there, my local independent station where Deep Space Nine was shown, you know, on syndication, it would show, on the weekends, it would show Deep Space Nine and then Babylon 5, one after the other. So I could watch them both. back to back, and that was pretty cool. Those were good days. Oh, those were good days to be a sci-fi fan. Before there were cable networks, before there was the Sci-Fi Channel and Netflix and Hulu and places where you could just sit down and binge on sci-fi whatever you want. Boy, having a UHF channel that aired Deep Space Nine and then Babylon 5 back to back. Oh boy, that was sci-fi fan heaven. I don't know if this next bit is going to be heavenly, but it is going to be slightly different from this first part of the video, because that sound effect indicates that it is now time for
the lightning round.
Harry Ray, lightning round question. Why are your segues in An Atheist Reads so much better than your ones in You Had to Ask? I don't know. I try my best. I try to do a good segue, and it just... I try to do a good segue for these, and it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work out. I don't know why. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Leto Anor, hey hun, what's your favorite Marvel TV show, and why is it Legion? Oh, I haven't watched Legion yet. I'm sorry. I haven't watched Legion yet, so I don't know. I'm sure it's great. Literally every single person I've talked to who has watched it says it's just amazing. So I will have to make time to watch it soon. But no, I haven't seen Legion. So if we're sort of counting just like over-the-air TV shows and not Netflix shows, then I guess my favorite would have to be Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., wouldn't it? I mean, that's fine because I love Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Lucas Hackett, yo Steve, I know this is really going to sound off topic, but out of amusement, would you pay big money to see Braun Strowman thrash the holy hell out of Jake Paul in a Hell in a Cell match? I probably wouldn't pay big money because I'm way out of Jake Paul's demographic. Like, I barely even know who that is. So no, I don't really have any investment in seeing him get the shit kicked out of him. So I probably wouldn't pay big money to see Braun Strowman beat the hell out of him in a Hell in a Cell match. But I would watch. It's always fun to see a wrestler beat the crap out of somebody, you know. It's one of the great joys of professional wrestling. Watching somebody who deserves it get the shit kicked out of them. Kaboom Splat Yuck 2. Have you read Treasure Island? No. To my everlasting shame, or at least to my shame until I get around to reading it, which hopefully I will someday. No, I have not read Treasure Island. God, I'm just fucking up all over the place. My segues suck. I haven't seen Legion. I haven't read Treasure Island. This is, whew, goddamn rough week. Rough lightning round, folks. Malevolent Divinity. Oh wait, The Defenders comes out today. So how about them Defenders? Is your adoration for Supergirl slipping because of the quality of this show? I clearly haven't seen it. I haven't watched The Defenders yet either. I'm sure The Defenders is good. The reviews I've seen of it make it sound sort of in the good, not great category. So I'm looking forward to, again, making time to sit down and watch it. But I don't see how it would affect my adoration for Supergirl. My love for Supergirl, I don't see how it could ever change unless Supergirl itself starts to actually suck, like, you know. Radical Bacon. I've revised my punching Nazis stance. Punch all the Nazis. Make racists fear again. What do I want for my birthday? 100 Nazi scalps. You? Yeah, I mean, not literally, you know. I don't know what I would do with 100 Nazi scalps, but in spirit, yeah, absolutely. You know what I would love? Here's what I would want for my birthday or every day. For every single fucking white supremacist, neo-Nazi, alt-right, whatever they want to call themselves, demonstration from now to the end of time to be met exactly like it was met in Boston, where you have like 100 pathetic little racists huddled under a pavilion surrounded by 50,000 people, making them feel surrounded and unwanted and unwelcome. That's what I would love to see every single time. And if that happens, then, you know what, let them keep the scalps. Samuel Sturgill. Steve, is me having German heritage something I should not be telling people about? I don't want it to become a heritage, not hate kind of thing. Oh, no. You shouldn't feel any kind of shame about having German heritage. I think I have German heritage. A lot of people have German heritage. Germany is actually a fantastic example to follow. The way Germany responded to Nazism after the war, after the Third Reich was toppled and humanity sort of resumed power in Germany, the way the German people have responded to it and have dealt with that very, very ugly part of their history by not looking away from it, but by also taking measures to ensure that it doesn't happen again, is incredibly admirable. And being a Nazi is not something you're born with. It's not part of your ethnic heritage. You know, if you were born with German ethnicity, that has nothing to do with it, and you should not be ashamed of that at all. So please don't feel like you have to, you know, don't let anyone know that I'm German. That sort of thinking is more in line with Nazi thinking, that you are who you are because of the state of your birth, and you are superior or inferior because of that. And that's not how you should feel about that at all. You please don't feel embarrassed or ashamed or afraid about your German heritage at all. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Corey Donaldson, what's your thoughts on director Matt Reeves directing the first Batman film? I think it's pretty cool, and I really enjoy his films like Cloverfield, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and War for the Planet of the Apes. I mean, I like Matt Reeves. I'm with you on his filmography. I think he's a good, solid filmmaker, and I'm not worried about it, but a lot of my excitement about that solo Batman movie, to the degree that I had it, was based on the fact that it would be an Affleck. He would be starring and he would be writing, and also at that time writing and directing. So it would be it would be altered, you know what I mean? It would be a superhero film that was very much the product of a singular creative vision. And I was very intrigued by that. Now that's not going to happen, so I'm less intrigued by it. And also, I mean, at this very early stage, things I've heard Matt Reeves say about his take on Batman just seem really pedestrian and sort of middle of the road. Like, well, Batman's interesting because he's the superhero without powers. It's not exactly a cutting edge insight into the character, you know. It's not exactly a fresh take. But yeah, we'll see. You know, we'll see. Matt Reeves, you're right. Matt Reeves is a very, very strong director. Mike Walker, during your Lemme Listen podcasts, do you ever listen to Ian Fraser Kilmister's band? No. As far as I know, there has been no specific listening to Motorhead during any of the Lemme Listen podcasts. I don't think it's prohibited. I think if someone said, let me listen to some Motorhead, I don't think Jason would be like, no Motorhead! But so far as I know, it has not been part of the content of any of the podcasts. Dylan Jones, did you make a trip to see the total eclipse? Was it awesome? Hopefully my glasses weren't fake and I'm not blind right now. Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully. No, I didn't make a trip. I live outside the path of totality, so I only got a partial eclipse. But I didn't go anywhere. I just watched it from my backyard, and it was awesome. It was amazing, and it was cool to see so many other people outside looking at it too. I mean, I live in a very small, very conservative sort of right-wing town, but there were a lot of people who were out looking at the eclipse. And by the way, they all were either wearing eye protection or they had, you know, like an eclipse viewer that they were using. None of them looked straight up at the eclipse like our clueless dipshit president of the United States. So that was reassuring. Joshua Purvis, hi Steve, hope your day is okay. My question is that if you could have any wrestler or wrestlers to team up with you, who would you pick? Thanks, Steve, for answering my question. Oh, this is one of the easiest questions I've ever gotten on this show because the answer is Samoa Joe. If I could pick one wrestler and I had to be in a tag team with them, I would pick Samoa Joe and I would just pat him on the back and I would turn that human wrecking ball loose on whoever was unfortunate enough to be facing us from the other side of the squared circle. I'd say, go get him, Joe, rip him up. Joe's gonna kill you. And that's what he would do until inevitably I would accidentally get tagged in, and then I would get in and whoever the babyface team was would just beat the living shit out of me, because that's how that match goes. You know, you team the heel up with his mouthy non-wrestler friend or manager or whoever, and then the mouthy guy, who is not a wrestler, gets tagged in and takes a beating. And that's what it would be. But I would have Joe on my side, so hopefully we would still win. Hopefully Joe would tag back in and, you know, he'd muscle bust the shit out of somebody, and there you go. But yeah, that's what I would do, Samoa Joe. Hey, that's it for the questions. That's the last one. It's time now for the shout out. The shout out this week goes to an organization called the Southern Coalition for Social Justice. This is an organization that is dedicated to protecting voting rights, to finding and creating opportunities for people of color, for black folks, for people who are in disadvantaged or marginalized groups, specifically in the American South. And I think this is very important because of the Confederate statues issue, because of Charlottesville, because of the resurgence of white supremacy, thanks in no small part to the Trump campaign and the Trump presidency, there's a tendency to sort of paint the entire South with that brush, to say that, well, they're all a bunch of racists, they're all a bunch of bigots, they all love their Confederate statues. And that, of course, is not the case. There are people of color who live in the South, who are proud of being from the South, who consider themselves a part of Southern culture, who are being oppressed and victimized and are suffering as a result of these people and their policies and their attitudes. And there are white folks in the South who are just as appalled and offended by that bigotry and that white supremacy and that intolerance as anybody else, and are doing their part to be allies to black folks and people of color, and to help to resist and to fight back and to make some positive changes. And the Southern Coalition for Social Justice is an organization comprised of just those sorts of people who are trying to make a better South, who are trying to fight for the rights of people in the South, and fight for equality in the South, and protect the voting rights of people in the South. And all of these very important things that need to be done. And these folks should be recognized and should be supported and should be pointed at as the example of what folks in the South should be aiming for. And I would just like to point out this group and say, let's support them, and let's not forget that there are plenty of good people in the South who are just as appalled by the white supremacy, the bigotry, the neo-Confederate sympathies of many people as a lot of the rest of us who aren't living in the South are. And are doing everything they can to stop it and to fight it and to make it better. So the Southern Coalition for Social Justice, that's the shout out. Very, very, very deserving group and well worth your attention if that's your sort of thing, which it should be. I'm just saying that. I'm just making that judgment. That's it for the shout out. As always, I want to recommend to you to listen to the Lemme Listen family of podcasts. These are podcasts that are co-hosted and created by my very good friend Jason Harding, and I want to specifically call your attention to the Late Seating podcast, which is the belated movie review podcast that Jason co-hosts with me, where we take a fresh look at a movie that has a reputation of either being a great classic or a terrible bomb. We review it, we go through the synopsis, we make fun of it, hopefully for your amusement as well as our own, and we decide whether or not the movie deserves its reputation, whether that reputation is good or bad. And if you go to the website right now, you can listen to our most recent episode, which is our review of the classic 1960s sexploitation flick by Russ Meyer, Faster Pussycat Kill Kill. That was a really fun show to do, and it turned out really well, one of our best shows, I think. And you can also get ready for our next episode, which will go up next week, which is our review of the baseball movie The Sandlot. So you can go back this week sometime when you have a few hours, watch The Sandlot, do a little bit of homework, get ready for the next new episode of Late Seating, and so you'll recognize the references and get all the jokes and know what the hell we're going on about when we review The Sandlot. And in the meantime, you can listen to all of the past episodes of Late Seating and, of course, all of the episodes of all of the other excellent Lemme Listen podcasts by going to LemmeListenPodcast.com. There you have it. I'm done. No more questions, no more shout-outs, no more podcast talk. I'm out of here. But I want to remind you before I go to please leave a comment on this video to ask me your question for next time. Because in order for me to do these, you have to ask. So please do leave a comment on this video. Ask me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. I will answer as many of your questions as I possibly can in the next video. But for that to happen, you have to ask. So please do leave a comment on this video asking me your question. That's how you do it. You leave a comment on this video and you ask me your question for the next video. And I reiterate that because people still ask me, how do we ask a question? You leave a comment on this video and I answer it in the next video next week. So that's how it works. Thank you all for your questions. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care, everybody. Hey folks, one more thing before I go. Thanks again for watching. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And also please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/SteveShives to become a patron of this channel. Thank you ever so much for watching, as always, and I'll see you next time.